I am Marion Bruce, but I was born Katz, and my connections with Cologne is that my father and all his family came from Cologne.
I'm Joan Noble, also Marion's older sister, born in South Africa to Arnold Helmut Katz and granddaughter of the family Katz in Cologne. There was a box, a big box with photos and letters, and occasionally our father would go through them. And these are just a fraction of the letters in the finest tissue paper, written mainly in the handwriting from my grandfather, my grandmother, but also my father's girlfriends, but very much old German script that Marion and I are trying to sort, and one day we want to have translated as well.
I can read a paragraph that she wrote on the 20th November, her last letter. It's a long letter. I'll just read a little bit. The worst has come to pass. This is when she was told that she had to be at the station on the 6th of December. The worst has come to pass, and after saying farewell to our poor Berta last Sunday, I too have to go like so many others. It was awfully hard letting go of my beloved Carl, her husband, and our dearly beloved. So relentless is death, tearing at the heart and everything that I loved about my homeland. Married almost 30 years in Cologne, bore children, shared in the good and the bad times with the dear ones. This step is the hardest, the last one, as my heart, gall and liver will not be able to bear it. I ask you to stick together, to be there for each other. I can't continue any further. Feel tightly embraced. Love always sends your Johanna, who greets and kisses you. This she wrote to my father. And Tony and I stood at Köln Deutz, and I really felt her looking at her beloved Köln, seeing the dome, and this would have been the last she ever saw of Cologne when she got on that train finally.
My name is Tony Bruce. My grandfather was from Cologne, as well as all his family, and his wife is from Grafenbruch, nearby. It was very powerful to go to many places, to go to the cemeteries, to go to the butcher shops and various different shops that the families owned. And as Joan says, the Stolpersteine are right outside. So their presence there and their ownership of things there are still recognized, and that they are, they were very proud of being from Cologne and being German and of their businesses. So it means a lot that they are still recognized there and in some way still exist there. But yeah, the sort of panic and stress that packing her last things and leaving everything she'd known and then going on a long cold journey to a place worse than her worst fears, it's a very powerful thing to go to the exact site where that happened, and also to see modern day still continuing. It's still a functioning railway station. Being there with my mother, as I say, there's more connection for her to remember her father, thinking about these things, and maybe sometimes talking to her about it. So it's very powerful to stand on that spot and look out. As my mum said, you can see the dome of the cathedral. So we could maybe see a similar view to what she would have seen. That's very powerful, but also very valuable to me that a German citizen took us there and took the care to show us these places, that he cared about who these people were and what had been done in his country. That's very valuable to me, that people now are willing to look at it.
Well, we always knew that we never had grandparents. Joan and I grew up knowing we didn't have grandparents. And we first visited, in fact, when I was 6 and Joan was 7 or 8, or even 9. and we went on a big trip to Europe to see the family who had survived. So we first visited Cologne really in 1956, shortly after the war, but have been back since. My father was immer ein Kölscher Junge, and he loved Cologne. He had friends there that he had since nursery school. No family left in Cologne, but we had some surviving family in Essen. And he even took me to witness Carnival. So ich habe Carnival mitgemacht.
I think that emphasizes that our father had really good memories of his life in Cologne, him growing up, going to school, becoming a butcher, which is what his father was, being very comfortable and having childhood friends and participating, as you heard, in the carnival and things like that, which is why he could go back to Cologne and be part of it again and have those connections, which were many, many good years. Because he left early. I have here some pewter, and I really don't know, that obviously was of the time, but this one has a shrapnel damage in it. And, these are just heavy items, and we know they are from that home, and we just obviously have to hold on to them, and there are more. But they're not familiar to us, but we know that's where they come from. So there's some nostalgia there.
I think because they lost everything, the few things they had were very precious.
The menorah behind me on the fireplace was his, but yeah, we're not sure if it was from Germany or something he purchased in South Africa. But either way, something he traveled overseas with and kept. Again, very heavy and important item for him, his connection to his family and his Judaism.
One of the things I have with me is a dinner service that my grandmother, Johanna, was her wedding trousseau, a huge dinner service. And she must have taken it to her sister Martha Lind in Essen when she was moved from their home to other houses and then to a ghetto. Not sure when. But years later, my father's cousin said, in our garage, we've got your mother's dinner service. And my father had it, and it was very, very precious. And now I have it, and I have some behind me. You can't use it, it's too good. But it is very important. It's from that time. And she thought she'd leave it there till she came back for it. And of course, she never did get back. I'll show you some bits. There were 12 of everything. It's absolutely beautiful. 12 plates, big plates, small plates, little plates, everything. Very, very beautiful. And it has pride of place in our homes. My cousin Anne has some, my father's brother's daughter, and I have some. Here's also a crystal bowl. This was from Zuhause. This was my dad's. He took this to South Africa. I could almost say I'm haunted sometimes by thinking of the terrible time that my grandparents and extended family had. When everything went wrong, they suffered, and they probably thought nobody knew what was happening. Nobody would remember. And I feel it's very, very important that we remember and we tell their story. And I very much identify, recently I've also just been reading accounts of the transport my grandmother went on from Köln. And, I feel for her. I feel it personally. I feel the emotion, and I feel I need to honour them by telling the next generation. It's a very difficult thing to tell, which is also what my parents couldn't really tell us. My father used to get very sad, and I got sad reading an account recently about the transport, thinking, how must my father have felt reading this about his mother? And I admire my parents for carrying on after their terrible loss. because that's what we must do. We must carry on and make the world better.
Yeah, I think with each generation, we're further away and slightly less connected to what happened, and maybe even more emotionally disconnected. Obviously, for my grandfather, this was much more of an emotional, more difficult thing. And, for my parents, for my mother, that's slightly further, but there is still a weight and an immense sadness, when you think of what happened to them, when you think of my great grandmother being alone, even the little details. Obviously, what the end result of the transport was horrific, but something that gets to me is just thinking of them sewing labels into their clothes and preparing all the organization. Nowadays moving house is extremely stressful, but the idea that these small details of the amount of work they had to put in, with everybody around them, discriminating against them and being free to be violent, and these kind of thoughts of what their day-to-day life was like, it does generate an anger and a sadness. If I'm honest, there is still a connection to that, and for me, I'm not religiously Jewish, though I respect the faith. For me, this is about my identity, that if they did come for the Jews again, that would be me, and that is who I am. So for me, very much this issue and what happened to my family defines who I am, and I readily identify with that.
I suppose what we're able to do is to try and put a bit of a face on it, but you actually have to sit down and make it work with photos and having a kind of proper record for them to then ask questions. I do a little bit of art, and so if you put a collage together of things, then hopefully that will beg questions. Who are these people? What's their story? And then you can elaborate on that. But I think it's another, for me also, it's holding on to their Judaism as well, because it's very easy to forget those roots if one gets totally assimilated, or so they died because they were Jews, and in a way that's very much their heritage, that they have to know where they came from and who they were.
I think the images that most people see of the Holocaust are in those latter stages of people on trains and in stations and arriving at camps and those and at that point there's just lots of scared faces, but to see them before then and to see their lives, in, as she says, in good times and bad, as Germans, as ordinary people who are having whatever, if you can call ordinary lives. But for me, that really brings it. I have a photograph of my grandfather, and it's not one of the ones with him with the whole family. It's just him looking quite cool, very young, and I love to see the character they had rather than these gaunt, scared faces at the end. So I think it's important for the world to realize who these people were before the worst of times were greeted them.